The truth about wine you won't find on the label. I run a small winery. Not a boutique, not mass market, just honest wine. I don't romanticize winemaking. It's not poetry. It's work, dirty, risky, expensive. I know what acidity, sulfur, and spoiled tannins are. And I know how to turn a lousy harvest into something people praise at tastings. How much does a bottle of wine that sells for €50 in a store actually cost? It depends on marketing, but if you strip away branding, logistics, and restaurant markups, the cost of the bottle itself, including glass, cork, label, and taxes, can range from €1.20 to €4, even for expensive wines. The rest is, well, air. But it'd be naive not to factor in your skills, experience, knowledge, employee wages, and the value of your own time. Once, as an experiment, I made 2 identical batches. One got a designer label, a heavy bottle, and a made-up, cheap name. The other went under my usual brand. The first was snapped up by restaurants for €39. The second sold for €7 in supermarkets. Same wine inside. That's normal, it's business. But when people start believing €50 is for depth of flavor, I just want to pour them both glasses blind and watch their faces. Is there a difference between a €2 wine and a €200 wine? Like, in taste, not the label. If you're not a pro, usually no. Especially if it's not a 30-year-aged wine but something fresh. It all comes down to balancing acidity, sugar, tannins, and aromas. You can nail that in cheap wine too. I've tasted expensive wine with off-sulfur levels that smelled like a wet rag. And I've had €3 Spanish table wine that went down like honey. A €200 wine often wins with ambience, crystal glass, white tablecloth, silence, and then, what depth? In blind tastings, I've seen simple wines beat grand crus. People don't separate taste from atmosphere. The industry knows this. What do you add to wine that you don't list on the label? Pretty much everyone adds sulfur. It's standard. It stabilizes the wine. But not everyone mentions it. Sometimes tannins, natural or synthetic, are added to bolster the flavor. There are enzymes to enhance aroma. There are acidity correctors, stabilizers, even glycerin for texture. It's all allowed, but nobody writes it down. Why? Because consumers would freak out. They want natural. But natural means your wine turns to vinegar in a week because yeasts do their own thing. One year, the grapes started fermenting right in the crates because of the heat. We saved it with enzymes and emergency filtration. The wine turned out fine, but natural. Hardly. What's more important? A truthful bottle or a truthful label? What's the worst, elite, wine you've ever tasted? A Burgundy with cork taint. Old wine, high rating. Opened it. Smelled like wet cardboard, rags, a hint of char. That's cork, a flawed stopper. The taste was like gargling mop water, and it cost €180. Because who's elite, it's supposed to be like that? No, a flaw is a flaw. Then there was this Tuscan wine vanilla aroma, but the taste was like chewing old oak. Too much time in a bad barrel. You don't drink that. You sniff it and make a wise face. All because it's pricey. But your tongue doesn't lie if it's bad. It's bad. Do you drink your own wine or do you prefer someone else's? I drink mine, but not always. When you cook soup every day, sometimes you just want a sandwich. Same with wine. Sometimes I open someone else's to see how they did it. Or to make sure I'm doing it right. But honestly, sometimes I just want a beer. You spend all day in the damp, messing with barrels, hands stinging from wine acid, back soaked. In that moment, a glass of Cabernet feels like a cruel joke. So I crack open a cold bottle of my own beer and drink. No green apple, aroma, no long finish. Just something that flows and doesn't make me think, what's a day at the winery like? No Instagram filters. It smells like wine acid and wet wood. Mornings you check barrels, any swelling, any leaks. Then it's fermentation work. Pump the must, clean tanks, dump the pommies. Clothes are stained, hands reek of iron and yeast. If it's bottling day, the conveyor hums, hands slip, corks fly. If it's harvest, it's mud, heat or cold, people are exhausted, someone's whining, someone's quit. No pretty glasses at sunset. You're in boots sloshing with sour grapes. Your lower back aches, your neck streaked with acid burns. But you keep going because you know if you don't do it today, tomorrow's worse. How do you react when someone says, "This wine isn't opening up"? I hold back. It's a cop-out phrase. People are scared to say, "I don't like it." They'd rather hide behind sommelier jargon. But if it's not opening up, why? Temperature, glass, or is the wine just flat? I had a guest swirl a pint at Nor for 3 minutes, then say, "It hasn't opened yet." I topped him up with cheap rosé. He sniffed, nodded. There we go. It's all about expectation. Sometimes I let people taste wine from a plain cup. It doesn't open. Then I pour it into a fancy glass, and they're like, wow. Same wine. Opening up isn't chemistry. It's psychology. Is it true that cheap wine gets spiked with alcohol and sugar? True, but not how you think. They don't pour vodka in. It's grape spirit, like in fortified wines. And sugar. Sometimes, to balance acidity. But more often it's concentrated grape juice or stabilizers that mimic sweetness. The worst is when wine doesn't finish fermenting, and they start stabilizing it. You get heavy, cloying slop. I've seen bottles where the sweetness comes from glucose syrup, not grapes. That's trash. But they market it as fruity, or dessert, wine, and it's legal. People drink it and think, smooth. It's just a sugar bomb with a kick. What's the dumbest complaint you've gotten from a customer? Once someone wrote that the bottle doesn't fizz when opened, like champagne, so it's spoiled. It was still red wine. Or a woman complained the wine smells too much like grapes. She expected it to smell like vanilla from some ad. Some demanded, I verify the authenticity of a €6 bottle. But the best was a guy who poured out the wine because it's not like it was on vacation in Italy. I asked what kind. He said, it was free there, and it tasted better with pasta. You stand there, listening, and realize sometimes your whole craft crashes against someone's memory. Have you ever sold wine you thought was bad? Once. It was a rough year: heat, drought, underripe berries, then fungus, and 20% of the harvest died. We salvaged what we could. The wine came out flat, acidic, no depth. But we had a contract, needed the volume. We blended it with last year's leftovers. It was a solid C-. I knew it wasn't me, wine. Not proud, but I'm not lying, the label was honest. I told myself then, you either survive or play artist. Sometimes you release a batch you don't love, and hope whoever drinks it just has a glass with dinner and doesn't notice. What was your worst moment during harvest? One year it was 36 degrees Celsius, scorching. Workers were beat, picking dragged on, and some grapes started fermenting right in the crates, under the sun on the spot. I jumped in to save it. Juice ran down my legs, started stinking. Within an hour, it was yeasty mush. I'm in a soaked shirt, gloves, scooping out this mess by hand. Then I notice, flies in my eyes, ears, nose. One guy passed out from the smell. We had no cooling, rushed it all to the cellar. That batch ended up down the drain, and we spent 2 weeks trying to save it. Every day it smelled like rotting fruit lodged in your lungs. Is it true that the same wine can smell and taste different and hit you differently? Absolutely. Not because wines are live, but because people aren't constant. You might drink a glass today and find it sour. Tomorrow, smooth. Everything matters: temperature, food, air, mood, even who you're with. I had a client complain the aroma wasn't the same as last time. I asked, what'd you eat? He said, spicy cheese and pineapple. Well, okay. Or sometimes a bottle sits open for half an hour and it blooms. Other times, it sours. The glass shape matters too. Pour the same wine into a tall one and a wide one, and it's like 2 different wines. So I always say, if it's not hitting right, don't blame anyone. Maybe it's just not your day. How much does a wine cost that you're not ashamed of, but regular people can afford? 8 to 12 euros. That's the honest range. For that you get wine with real effort, not just mass, blended leftovers. Under 5 euros, it compromises huge volumes, automation, cut corners. Above 15 euros, marketing kicks in. You're paying for the story, the label, the fancy bottle. Sometimes, sure, it's a masterpiece. But not always. I have a wine for 980 euros, from one slope, hand-picked, fermented in concrete, aged in old oak. No frills, but honest alive. Those are the bottles I love. You drink and know where the money went. Not ads. Were there moments you wanted to quit? Yeah, a few times, especially after hail. You're standing there, your whole harvest pulped. Clusters smashed, leaves shredded, just mud left. Or one night a tank leaked, 4,000 liters down the drain. You show up morning, and it's a red river on the floor, smells like blood, and you just sit on a crate and shut up. Once, my dad died, and I couldn't go to the funeral. Fermentation was on, no one to cover. I wanted to sell everything then, but I didn't. Because this isn't a business. It's a disease. You can't stop. Like an idiot, you go sniff a barrel, taste from a hose, and hope this time it'll be better. What words or actions from guests really get under your skin? When someone grabs a glass, takes a sip, and says, "I don't know about the taste, but I think there's sulfites." It's like tasting soup and saying, "I sense salt molecules." All wines have sulfites, even natural ones. It's like saying, "I taste wine in the wine." Or when guests show up to a tasting and first thing ask, "How many degrees is it?" I'm thinking, why do you care? You don't ask a pizza how many calories it has. Or when they snap 100 photos of the glass, take selfies, but don't taste the wine. Then I feel I wasted my time. I wanted to share wine, but I shared a photo up. Have you ever bottled wine in plastic? Yeah. And I'm not ashamed. People have different budgets. There's this old guy in my village who buys 5 liters in a jug. He doesn't talk about aroma or terroir. He gets it to put on the table, slice some meat, call the neighbors. And yeah, I pour it into plastic for him. But it's the same wine as in glass, just without the pretension. Once at a festival, a guy told me, "Your wine in plastic is a crime." I asked, "You sure you can taste the difference?" He didn't answer. Because it's not about taste. It's the bottle. If the bottle matters to you, you're not ready for wine. How can wine smell like gasoline? Is that normal? Normal, if it's Riesling. Not every one, but aged ones, with specific acidity and from certain climates. That gasoline scent is a compound called TDN. It develops over time, and for some it's a thrill. First time, people freak out, open the bottle, sniff, and it's like inhaling a gas can. But then you catch layers. Wax, apple, wet asphalt after rain. It's not a flaw, it's a feature. I poured a Riesling like that once, and they said, "Your wine's spoiled." 3 years later, that batch won a medal. So you tell me, spoiled or not, have you ever blended wine from leftovers, bits and pieces from barrels? Yeah, sometimes it's called assemblage, sometimes saving wine. You've got 30 liters here, 50 there. Dumping it feels wrong. You taste, it's okay but lacks depth. So you play alchemist. Grab a pipette, mix in a test tube. Sometimes it's hell's one's acidic, another's bitter. Together they're vinegar, but sometimes it clicks like a puzzle. One gives aroma, another body, a third length. Once we mixed 3 leftover barrels and it outperformed the main batch. But honestly, that's rare. It's not magic, just luck. Like making soup from fridge scraps. Can you really tell the vintage or grape variety by taste? Variety, yeah, most times. Not because I'm some super taster, but because I know how they behave in different conditions. Sauvignon gives green notes, grass, acidity. Merlot's soft, with cherry, cream, but sometimes a variety hides due to oak, fermentation, blending. Vintage is trickier. Some years are so close you barely tell. But others, one cool, one hot. You feel it, one's lean and nervy, the other heavy, almost stewed. Blind tastings are the funniest. Everyone guesses. I once mistook my wine for a neighbor's, and I realized wine's not a test. It's pleasure. There's little joy in guessing games. Which, natural, wines don't do it for you, even if they're trendy. The one's made for clout, not taste. Natural wine isn't about cloudy or rubbery. It's about trusting the product. I've tried wines that smell like wet dog, taste like old kefir, but everyone's like, it's alive, it's cool. And I'm thinking, it's just poorly made. Some winemakers say, I added nothing, literally nothing. So what? If it reeks of rot, I don't care, you added nothing. Add something. Natural wine should be tasty, not weird. I know a guy who works with wild yeasts, no filtration, and it's clean, consistent every time. That's skill. The rest is excuses. Do you drink wine every day? Or are you sick of it? I drink. Almost every day. Not much. Not because I have to, but because it's interesting. Sometimes I pour a glass at night to check on a batch. Sometimes to unwind. But I don't get drunk anymore. Winemakers have a weird relationship with alcohol. It's like a chef with salt, you respect it, don't overdo it. Sometimes I crave beer, after a hot day. Sometimes brandy. But wine's like a conversation. It speaks, sometimes loud, sometimes a whisper. One year I got tired of wine, nothing sparked joy. So I switched to tea for a month. Came back and remembered why I do this. Because it's alive. What does a winery smell like in the morning? If it's fall, first, damp stone. Then cold grapes. Then yeast. Walking through the fermentation room, the air's sweet and sour. like opening jam and splashing in vinegar. It can sting your nose. If fermentation was active overnight, the room's warm, even if it's chilly outside. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it bubbles. If malolactic's happening, it smells like cheese rind. One morning I walked in and thought, smells like a French market. Cheese, fruit, bread, and a hint of sewer. That's normal. Wine's food. It should smell like food, not perfume. Have you ever lost friends over wine? I had a partner at the winery. We went in together, started production. At first, it was great hunting for bottles, tasting barrels, drinking at night. Then money came and so did fights. I wanted natural, he wanted fast and cheap. Then yelling. Then he dumped my barrel without asking. Said it wasn't usable. I walked away. No drama. But inside I was gutted. We don't talk anymore, it hurt. Because wine's like a kid you pour in time, soul, nerves. When someone treats it like a product, you can't stay close. Now my winery's mine. And my circle's tight. Are there really winemakers who slip in sugar, flavorings, dyes? Sure. Especially in mass market stuff. It's not oval, it's business. Cheap wine might get concentrated grape juice for sweetness, or powdered tannin for body. Flavorings. Yeah, sometimes oak extract instead of barrel aging. Dye-s. Less common, but happens. Like if the wine's too pale, they'll add grape concentrate. It's allowed in some countries, as long as it's within limits. I don't do it, but I get why others do. People want €3 wine to smell like vanilla and berries. How do you get that when the grapes cost you $2? What's the weirdest or funniest wine description you've heard? Smells like wet potato and a hint of a funeral procession. No joke, it was in a sommelier's tasting notes. Or this, tastes like a sad memory of summer. People get carried away. I describe wine simpler, like blackcurrant, smoke, a touch of green, but customers love poetry, especially if the bottle says, brutal finish with shades of forest after rain. Sounds like a novel. Though inside, it's just Cabernet. I don't judge. Sometimes wordplay's part of the game. Just don't let the taste disappoint. I've got a list somewhere of the dumbest phrases. Have you ever deliberately messed up wine to see who'd notice? Once, at a private tasting with some experts who always acted superior, I took my regular wine and added a bit of sulfur dioxide over the limit. Not dangerous, but it smells slightly like a wet matchbox. Served it blind. Everyone said, interesting, unconventional, a bit mineral, a bit smoky. One guy said, it's the winemaker's style. I sat there thinking so much for expertise. Then I fessed up. Some laughed, some got mad. Since then, I know taste is subjective. Even pros screw up. What smell in winemaking can you not stand? Sulfur bacteria. It's hell. If an infection creeps in and reduction starts, it smells like rotten eggs, sewage, sometimes burnt rubber. You're walking through the winery, and it hits your nose something's gone wrong. You scramble, check, ventilate. Sometimes a copper plate helps. It binds the sulfur. Sometimes you decant, aerate. Sometimes nothing works, and you dump the wine. I've had whole barrels go to waste. And that smell, it sticks in your nose. Even when you go home, it's like it's still there. That's what I hate. It's the smell of failure. Have you ever tasted wine that moved you to tears? In Italy, at a tiny family winery. An old man poured us a glass of wine he didn't sell. It was made from grapes he'd planted with his father. He held the bottle like a child. The wine was simple, light, a bit tart, with aromas of strawberry and earth, but it spoke. I drank and felt it wasn't a product, but a memory. The old man watched, saying nothing. And I teared up, not from the taste, from how much life was in it. Since then, I know great wine isn't about ratings. It's when everything inside you goes quiet. Were there times you knew the wine was spoiled but had to sell it? Not spoiled, but underwhelming. Sometimes you hope a wine will come around, and it doesn't. It's not bad, no stink, not cloudy. But it's soulless. And you're stuck, dump it. Or sell it under your name. I always do this if I can. I reroute it to bulk kegs for cheap bars. No name, no label. Once I gave it out at a festival as experimental, but sell it as my brand. No. Reputation's everything in this game. Sell crap once, and you're done. No one will trust you, even if you pour gold later. So yeah, I've lost money, but not my face. Why do people call wine alive? Is it marketing, or is there something to it? Not marketing, there's something to it. Wine's not just liquid. It's got yeasts, bacteria, oxygen, Even in the bottle, it keeps changing. Open it today, it's one thing. Tomorrow, different. Too cold, it's mute. Warmer, it opens up. Sometimes it days, in half an hour. Sometimes it lasts a week. I had a bottle once, opened it, it was flat. Meant to toss it, but didn't. A day later, fresh bread and prune aromas. Where'd that come from? No clue. That's the life. Like a person, one day they're gray, quiet. Then, boom, they're singing. Same with wine. That's why we love it. Would you do this if there was no money in it? Just for the process? No. Honestly, no. I love wine, the land, the fermentation tanks, grapes up to my elbows in juice. But without money, it's slavery, it's tough. You're up at 5 a.m., back aching, hands itching from sulfur, barrels leaking, pumps busted. If you can't pay rent or buy your kid new shoes at the end, what's the point? It's not romance, it's production. Hard production. Beautiful. Yes. Noble. Yes. But only if you're not in the red. I know people who quit winemaking because they couldn't hack it. Their wines were stunning, but the market chewed them up. Without money, you don't last. Nobody does. What do you think of natural wine? Trend or future? Both. Natural wine's an attempt to give wine back its soul. No additives, no filtration, no chemicals. I respect those winemakers. But let's be real, some of those wines are just bad. Smell like manure, sour, murky. And they tell you, it's the style. No, it's a mistake. I've made a few natural batches and learned without discipline, it's a gamble. Good natural wine is top-tier skill. It needs control, cleanliness, and more control. Not just, oh, it fermented on its own, so it's natural. You could sell vinegar that way. So yeah, it's a trend. But not everyone's cut out for it. Have you ever drunk your wine a year later and regretted bottling it? Not regretted, but thought, could have done better. At bottling, strawberry aroma, zing, fire. A year later, dull, scent's gone, acidity's flat, like soapy water. Another time, a red. Young, I rushed it for a show, it didn't settle. A year later, harsh, boozy. You learn from it. Realize haste kills. Want cash? Make lemonade. Wine hates hurry. I'm slower now. Better lose time than lose face. But yeah, there've been moments I opened my wine and thought, why'd I even hit start on that filter? How many glasses does it take to tell? Great. Wine from just good wine. Sometimes one sip. Great wine speaks right away. It doesn't shout, doesn't shove oak or berries in your face. It's like someone walking into a room. You feel they're real. It's calm. It lingers. It shifts in the glass. You come back to it. It's new. Good wine's tasty. Great wine's wise. I've had 12-euro wines leave more of a mark than 200-euro bottles. It's not about price, it's harmony. If you get that from the first sip, you're lucky. If you don't, no big deal. Just drink with an open heart.